Good evening and welcome to the Zero Waste Week edition of the ZWAC Show. ZWAC, ZWAC, stands for the Zero Waste Advocacy Committee of the Northern California Recycling Association. I am your host, John Moore. So when we advocate against people who want to waste, we use the verb to ZWAC them. And if you would like to ZWAC somebody, please join NICRA's committee. Every month on the second Tuesday, the ZWAC Show presents something new and interesting in the zero waste space, spiced up by a bit of recycling history from our recycling archives. 10 years ago at recycling conferences, the idea of deconstructing buildings, that is, salvaging the reusable parts and not just blowing them up or crushing them, was only aspirational. Today, a number of companies actively seek this work, and with competition comes innovation. Tonight, I will interview the founder of Oakland-based The Reuse People, Ted Reiff, about how his deconstruction work and how he came to be in that business. And following that, our archives director, Susan Kinsella, will tell us an inspiring story or two from the past, and I hope you enjoy the show. So thank you, Ted, for joining us. How did you get into this business?
Really by accident. It's again one of those wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, yeah, but that's the story. You know, Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter said that about lawyers. Most of them get to it by accident. And I have to agree with that statement. But then you course corrected somehow and you got to where you are. Tell us about that.
Well, I was with a company in a partnership down in Mexico at the time in Tijuana, and the peso twisted on me, and I decided to get the heck out of Mexico and step back into across the border. But just before I did, there was a conference that I and an attorney and an accountant gave. No, this isn't a joke about the bar. Uh, but and it was how to the NAFTA accords were on the fast track to the Clinton White House at the time, and it was people were interested in how they can get into Mexico because a lot of foreign money was pouring in, so that the foreign corporations could take advantage of assembling their product in Mexico and getting it imported to the U.S. under favorable trade conditions. Anyway, there was a lot of infrastructure going on, and I gave it was about maybe 500 people in the audience about how to import money, equipment, and people into Mexico, and to take advantage of the NAFTA accords. And after that was over, there was a woman in the audience who I didn't know, and she had called me. She introduced me, or introduced herself to me. Her name was Judy Bishop. And she said, I want to help the flood victims. This was in the spring of 93. In 92 and 93, there was a terrible El Nino year for both Tijuana as well as San Diego. And literally hundreds thousands lost their homes, and there were several hundred who lost their lives in the flooding. They lived, the poorer folks that lived down in the river valleys. And she was looking to put a drive together for used building material and making a donation to the homeless down there. And she contacted me about how to do it. In April, she put together in April '93, she had put together a drive for used building material at Jack Murphy Stadium. Well, it's called Jack Murphy Stadium then. And the city had given her and myself and a bunch of volunteers the parking lot. And in that 2-day weekend, middle of April, several hundred people donated. Habitat donated an entire truck of brand new drywall, but all the other stuff was used material. And the total shipment was that we had was 21 tractor trailer loads and 400 tons of literally of materials were across the border and into Mexico for rebuilding of their homes. So that was just a one-off. About 2 months later in June, she called me and she said, and this is when I knew she was crazy. He said, how do we make a business out of this? And we sat down that summer in '93, wrote a business plan, and did the first pickup with borrowed trucks, a borrowed warehouse, and borrowed employees. Thanksgiving weekend in '93. That was our first operational day. And from there it grew. We uh, we had a lot of trouble in and our whole facility was in San Diego, but we just couldn't get the traction we thought we needed and we should have. And we were approached by people who were with stopwaste.org and suggested that we open a branch office in Alameda. And I told them that we're too small to afford a branch. And they said, well, we've got this grant program. Why don't you apply? We did in '99. We got the grant. We hired our first manager. He helped us find a location, which was the waste management's, ultimately became waste management's facility there in San Leandro at their transfer station. It was a parking lot that they weren't using, and they gave us the parking lot. No cover or anything else like that, but that's where we started. A couple of years later, we moved to Alameda, and we're there on the old Naval Station. Did the deconstruction of the Matrix movie out there, the last two of the trilogy, and then ultimately moved. I think it was in 2006 to our present location in Oakland. They're on San Leandro Street.
So how did you get from having a parking lot full of unsorted construction and demolition material to being a company that deconstructs buildings?
Well, it was actually started, the deconstruction started our second year. We were just dumpster diving and down in San Diego. And Judy suggested that we get a license. And I had been a contractor back in Ohio, and it was fairly easy for me at that time to get a California license, and it was demolition license. And so we did, and that was the only way we knew of to secure our supply line, because otherwise it was just subject, again, as I said, to going out with the truck and picking things up and hoping people would stop by and drop their toilets off. So that put us in. It was, I think it was 94. No, let's see, we started in '93, so it's be '95 is when we actually started in the deconstruction business.
So your business is partly a deconstruction business and partly a retail outlet for C&D?
It is right now. We are just that, just the distribution center. We have trained hundreds of contractors around the country, and several of them in the northern Bay Area or in the Bay Area, Northern California. And there was no sense in us competing with them. It just didn't make sense to compete with people who had trained with us and paid us for training and so forth. So about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we got out of. I still hold the license, but we actually got out of the hands-on business, and we gave our entire crew, the manager, the crew chiefs, and the workers to another organization, Marcan Enterprise, over on the peninsula, because they had trouble hiring, and they needed a second or third crew, and it was a great deal because all of our employees left us but got a raise in the process. So it was a good deal.
So what does the current business look like in terms of facilities and outlets and what you do on a daily basis?
We've got right now got right at 50,000 square feet. Most of that is devoted to the retail warehouse and the lumber yard. There is some backup storage of about maybe 10,000 square feet, and of course our offices, which are a couple of thousand square feet. But most of it is just what a retail store should be, is stuff out on the retail floor. We have a turnover of a couple of times a year, like a little more, but plenty of people come in daily. Literally, we have people coming in daily, and sometimes they buy, and sometimes they're just looking. But yeah, it's been an amazing venture. The retail side of it is the key.
Mhm.
The only problem with building material salvage, deconstruction, diversion of materials from the landfill is distribution. That's the biggest problem we face as a country. We've got locations in several other cities in the country, but the biggest problem is still the distribution of material.
When you say that, do you mean the supply side or the sales side?
Neither. The demand is there, the supply is there. It how do you get it from job A to buyer B when they're not only 2 feet away, but 2,000 miles away? And we've got to figure, where's Jeff Bezos when we need him? Seriously, that's the problem. We've got plenty of material. And a lot of companies, of course, are going online now, like we are. We started online. We tripped a little bit last year and couldn't quite get up and running, but we're up and running with an online store this year. Many companies similar to ours have got online stores, and that certainly helps. But it's shipping a sub-zero refrigerator a couple 100 miles is an expensive proposition. Yeah, Neil.
So when you
I
say you were training your contractors, you don't mean like with a whip and a chair. You probably mean economically.
Yeah, what they did, they knew how to remove a window, a door. Certainly, they know how to remove the lumber, but what they don't know is how it needed to be packaged and prepared to save the value of
Mhm.
it. And that's really what we trained them on, not how to remove something. If they didn't know that, then we didn't even want to talk to them. But the people we trained were mostly contractors that were in the construction, not the demolition business. Very few were in demolition. Most of them were in the construction or remodeling business.
So what kind of training do you give them on preserving the material for resale?
The first thing we do is sit down with them and typically the boss and their lead people on the job, and just go over a PowerPoint presentation, a discussion of the benefits, how it's to happen, photographs, PowerPoint presentation, and then that takes a couple of hours. And then either that day or the next day, we're in the field on their first job, and we literally go through the building with them, removing various pieces of it over the next couple of weeks. And we're not there every day. We're not there all day, any particular day. We just come as as they need assistance and want that help. I'm shrink wrapping cabinets after they're removed, making sure all the screws and the nails that were exposed are removed so no one gets hurt. Keeping the frames on doors so every door is a pre-hung door. It's little things, but quite important.
Well, there must be an economic portion of that training where they either do it the way you want to or there's no sale, right?
Exactly. Oh, no question about it. That's why the preparation of the material after it's been removed is critical. For instance, all lumber has to be denailed. It has to be all unitized in the same length, the same species, the same dimension. And that's how we receive it at our facility. Um, we don't need them to help us unload. We've got our crews there and our forklifts and can do it. We can unload a semi in a matter of an hour. But
So when I look
the
at your website and it says deconstruction, it sounds to me like your company doesn't do the deconstruction, you facilitate the deconstruction. Am I right?
that is exactly what we're doing now. That is exactly what we're doing. Yep.
And your
and
your, your company is set up as a nonprofit. Why did you do that?
we looked at two things when we first started the company. We had originally written the business plan for a for-profit organization, but we realized that we didn't have enough money to actually acquire the material ourselves and then have the sales, and the sales price would have to be too high to cover a lot of those costs. What we determined was the nonprofit side of the business, if the materials are then donated to us. So the owners receive, in many cases, substantial benefit from a tax benefit.
Right.
And that's, without that, we probably would be a tenth of our size.
So in that kind of a transaction, you have to give the seller, so to speak, a piece of paper showing you get a tax credit for X dollars, right?
It's a tax donation, not a credit.
That's what I
Okay.
meant. A charitable
Okay.
donation.
Yeah. And how that works is we do a survey. Somebody calls us, contractor calls us, we go visit the project, take photographs, and write up a report about the quantity and the quality of the salvage material that we believe should be salvaged. We send that to a number of appraisers who are qualified by the IRS to do this kind of an appraisal process. And those appraisers, at no cost to the owner, refers back to the owner with an estimate of value. And typically it's a low end and high end, $40,000 to $50,000, some range, with the agreement with us that they'll never be lower than the lowest value that they give the customer. So now the customer has got the donation value, what that cash value is, and then the contractor, our deconstruction contractor comes in and gives an estimate on deconstruction. They also probably have gotten an estimate on demolition. So now they've got everything, economically in front of them. We live in an economic world, and it's the tax benefit that certainly drives deconstruction.
So do you ever hear from the IRS that you're giving too large a calculation on the donations?
No, in 2009, we were audited. There was a program that the IRS came up with in late 2008. And basically that program said that any office that's got a deconstruction operation going on in their bailiwick has to be audited. And as one of the larger companies in the country doing it at that time, we got the letter in January 5th of 2008, and they were with us for almost 6 months, not literally on the premises, but coming in and out and calling us and talking to us and being on the premise. We all but one mistake that we had made on a payroll was the only thing they asked us to correct.
Wow,
So they were very satisfied with how we did it.
that's great. So
Yeah.
are your challenges more on the supply side or the demand side?
They used to be on the supply side. There was no question about it. The challenge now is on the retail side. We've noticed that our turnover of material is a little less today, not much, but enough to raise some eyebrows. But is that our turnover of material is less than it was 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, we were scrambling for material.
So mindful that at least one competitor on the Zoom with us, Dan Knapp and Urbanor. What are your secrets for improving the sales? What do you try to do to improve them?
Well, the biggest thing right now is online sales. And as I said, we started last year and we tripped a couple of times on it, but finally got it under control, and we're doing our online sales now. That we expect to have a lot of customers. Also, all the social media. We're doing some radio advertising this year up in the Bay Area on I can't think of the radio station now. Anyway, we got some radio advertising going on. We do a lot of social media stuff, and then of course we have the online store, and that certainly is helping.
Is your target market somebody who wants a a bulk of used material, or are you focusing on the do-it-yourself handyman?
Do-it-yourselfers, first-time home buyers, sometimes owners of apartment complexes in modest, economically modest areas. But day in and day out, it's the do-it-yourselfer. We do have contractors coming in. We do have some big sales that we do make, but just day in and day out, it's the individual.
On the online sales, is it doors, windows, bathtubs? What do you is there a focus?
No,
No.
no. Right. Well, right now, as we're starting up, we don't have all of our inventory loaded. But as we're starting up now, it's all the things that turn over, between doors, windows, cabinetry, appliances, and lumber represent 85% of our business. The rest, plumbing fixtures and lighting fixtures and that kind of thing make up the balance. And that'll change from literally from day to day, week to week, month to month, just based on what our inventory is of those items. Because one of the problems is we're not the retailer that can pick up the phone and order another case of something. We get what we get. So that has a lot to show what our sales are.
What's the retail store like? What's the hours? How big is it?
Well, the whole retail store is about 40,000 square feet. 11,000 of it is a lumberyard. And then there's two buildings, 2.5 buildings actually, that make up the balance. And everything is sorted by the type or by the class: doors, windows, cabinetry, appliances, lighting fixtures, etc. We are very good at merchandising the material. And the first building we started, we're in our present location, is 10,000 square feet. Then we moved to a second building that became available that was 9,000 square feet. And we added a 3,000 square foot building to that. And then we took over another portion, another smaller building, and then we built a lumberyard. So it's very easy to walk in and and find the right. We have signage, lumber here, doors there. Come see our windows in this corner. Very easy to find us.
How many employees do you have?
In the retail store, we have 7. In the entire country or company in the country with our people out in the field, I think we're at 23.
What do the field people do?
We don't have facilities in locations. Let's pick one, Chicago. We've got a partnership there. But our person there, the first thing they did was to go out and find somebody who would accept used materials. There's no sense in doing deconstruction if there isn't a place to take them and somebody that wants them. And there was. And then the next thing he needed to do was to go train a contractor or 2 or 3 or 4 to do the deconstruction. So that's what they do. And then they just facilitate the process. They go visit the process. They take those pictures I mentioned earlier. They put the customer in touch with appraisers, and they manage the delivery and the final inventory for the donation.
Sounds like you have to reach your tentacles out a long way.
Yeah, that no question.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. So do you do any kind of upcycling on premises or otherwise?
No, we've talked about it briefly in the past, but quite frankly, John, they're 2 different businesses. There's just no question about it. And there have been a couple of organizations that have gone broke in the business around the country where they have tried to do both. And they're just 2 really completely separate businesses. One, you need some true craftsmen if you're going to be upscale, like building, dining room tables or furniture of any kind. you've got to have some really good machinery and really good craftspeople. That's that's not us.
It's not worth contracting it out like the milling for it.
Haven't found enough people to be doing it. I know
Mhm.
we know that there are in the Bay Area, there are some, well, there used to be the Wooden Duck. They bought a lot of our materials. They were in Berkeley,
Mhm.
very well-known furniture manufacturer. I think
Mhm.
they went out of business about 8 years ago. But they, in fact, they were so interested in buying our lumber that they would pay us ahead of time just to make sure that they got first dibs on the lumber that came in.
That's a good sale.
Yeah, but they're no longer there. We've talked to what is it, Heritage Lumber up in Marin County or Sonoma County, and but he's into the real high class lumber. Our high class lumber is not very classic. It's 2x4s, 6s, 8s
Mhm.
of Doug fir. Period. That's it. And it's just he's looking for big logs and timbers and that sort of thing, which we just never see.
So going back to the deconstruction for a second, one thing that when we've had people on the show talking about deconstruction is they were limited in the number of deconstruction jobs that they could get. And typically it was, old residential buildings. It sounds like in your business plan, you've reached out across the country so that you have other people doing deconstruction and you're training them to do that. So is that the way to expand the deconstruction business?
Oh, it is because then that contract because with the first objection the contractor has is it costs too much.
Mhm.
That's their immediate reaction.
Mhm.
Once we show them, the economics and that yes, it does cost more, and don't be afraid to charge more because we have this tax benefit on the other end.
Mhm.
Their next argument is I don't have the crews.
Mhm.
And believe me, today it used to be not a problem, but in the last couple of years, as you probably know, the entire construction industry is 25% behind on employment.
Mhm.
And that's with the contracts they've already got signed. So labor is the next part of the problem. Is managing field crews, which is one reason why the demolition people don't get into it. They've got equipment, they know how to run equipment, they've got operating engineers, they've got CDL commercial drivers for their trucks. They don't have boots on the ground, and except for maybe John who runs or Sam who runs the hose to keep the dust down. That's about the only boot on the ground that most demolition contractors have.
Are there any places that have training programs, whether through perhaps a union apprenticeship program or otherwise, that would train people to do it?
No, we have a worker training program. We've trained probably 600 people across the country, working with various organizations that have cadres. We started out with the California Conservation Corps.
Mhm.
They came to us, and that's when we first piloted our first training program. And since then, we've worked with Youth Build. We've worked with other local organizations that have a cadre of younger, typically at-risk youth looking for something new to get into, and that's the kind of training that we do. We literally, it's a 14-day training where we actually take a building down.
Mhm.
We have 3 or 4 days of classroom activity, and between the objective part of the program and the subjective part, they have to have a 70% average grade, and they would get a certificate. And what we also do is while we're doing that training, actually taking this building down in, let's say, Kansas City, we bring in local contractors to visit the site to see what the students are doing, and hopefully they'll interview one or two.
Mhm.
And it's a way for us to try to move that employment ahead.
Have you worked with Job Corps at all?
We tried a little bit with Job Corps in San Diego when we were down there. The problem with Job Corps is not the students, not their mission, but is they have to report to a single facility first in the morning,
Mhm.
get that rundown. Then they have to go to drive everybody at once to the job site, and then they have to get off early and go back to their core office and get debriefed.
Mhm.
And that kind of thing has to be done in 8 hours, and it reduces the work time to only 6. And it just isn't enough time for them and for us to get the job done, unfortunately.
So if you got to wave a magic wand and get one thing out of the way that's causing this distribution problem, what would you change?
Um,
I know it's a hard question. Sorry.
yeah, no, not at all. Again, I get back to Jeff Bezos. Anybody got a line into him or one of his folks? That's what it's going to take. It's going to
Well,
take massive distribution. Go ahead,
yeah,
Neil.
if I can interject, I had a conversation with uh, the folks at St. Vincent de Paul in Lane County, um, and their suggestion was to build for the country to build a series of intermodal transportation networks so that you could get the stuff from the East Coast to the West Coast and everything in between and vice versa. So that trying to solve the problem that Ted mentioned with having good stuff in one city and the markets in the other city. So that was one suggestion that uh, my gosh, who runs St. Vincent de Paul? McDonald, Terry
Terry.
Yeah,
McDonald.
Terry,
Yeah.
Terry McDonald. Yeah, bright guy, very
Yes.
bright guy.
Well, if I could skip in front of Dan, because I see Dan has his hands up, I just want to mention um, on my first visit to Ted years ago in his San Diego yard, I think it was south of the city. I was impressed with his innovation. He needed space, so what he did was he bought a number of overseas shipping containers and piled them up, so his inventory was moving sky high instead of spreading out. And the second innovation was for several years he ran a reuse contest, which I thought was absolutely ingenious. People all over the country submitted their pictures and explanation of what they built using used materials, and it was very innovative and very creative. So I tip my hat to Ted for many innovations, including those two.
Well, it sounds like a big ambitious thing you're trying to do and a lot of logistical issues. I'm going to open it up for questions in a moment, but I had a couple more of mine. Um, One is in your operation, do you run into any regulatory barriers that you would prefer not to have?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is really going to come home to roost, John, with the commercial. About 2 years ago, we dipped our toes into the commercial side of instead of we had been till that point in time, we've been residential only. Few smaller commercial buildings, primarily wood structures. Um, but with the commercial, uh, it's commercial material that should go into a commercial building. And then we get into codes. Fire rated door is got a 1 hour rating, but using that door in a new construction today would necessitate a 2 hour rating. The panic hardware on doors would change. It's who gives the warranty? So far in our discussion with contractors, they're willing to many of them, not all, but many of them are willing to hold that warranty and to live up to it and provide it to the owner. But that is going to be a big deal over with any massive new construction going on with used material. So yeah, the ordinance and of course with lumber, we all know what that is. It has to be generally has to be regraded if it's for structural purposes. There are ways around that. You could certainly call your local engineer, structural engineer, and have him sign off on the drawings. He may say, well, instead of 2x6s, you got to go to 2x8s or something like that. But those engineers are hard to come by. The regrading of the lumber. The problem with regrading is not really the cost. To an extent, a good grader for $500 to $1,000 could grade an entire warehouse if it's prepared properly. The problem is you've got to accumulate a warehouse full of material and not sell it to pay for the grader to come in and do that. And again, that's a distribution problem. It's a storage problem,
Right.
and you can't sell it right away. So those are stumbling blocks.
If only Amazon would take it over.
That's right.
And then we'd have
we
a lot
think-
of plastic stuff.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I was just saying we'd have a lot of plastic wrap on everything.
Well, yeah, they're getting a little better at that, but you're right.
Well, let me open it up to questions. Dan, you had a question?
Well, I wanted to say, it's more of a comment right off the bat. Back earlier, John, you talked about reuse people being a competitor. I don't really think of it that way. My thought is, and I realize that we have different business plans and that we're in the same business in many ways, but we're also real different in many ways. But the fact is that, to me, our common competitor is the landfill, not each other. We're still a small bunch of industries trying to make a go of it. We've actually grown quite a lot to the point where we're a threat to those bigger waste companies, but we're not there yet. And so really, our main competitor is wasting industries that make their money by systematically destroying resources rather than conserving them. And Ted, I welcome you to the family of reuse businesses, and I hope you do the same for me, because I think we have a lot more in common than we have in the way of differences. The last thing I wanted to say is that as a business person, and I liked what Ted brought up about the contractors saying, oh, well, no, it costs too much. It costs too much. Well, I've heard that again and again in the recycling industry too. Let's do cost analysis. Let's find out how much it costs. And they're always talking about cost. To me, cost is investment. And if you can invest, cost is totally meaningless unless you can show that you can actually make more money by investing than you can by not investing. So the thing is, the cost, looking at cost is meaningless without looking at income. And you have to then project what the income is going to be, and you have to be pretty accurate at it. But in any event, that's the other side of the equation. And I think we need to get to a more sophisticated idea of how business actually works to understand why it's possible to go head over heels in debt in order to make more money. We do that. We do that all the time. I've done it over and over again. So that's the way you grow a business. You have to have some finance up front to make whatever changes are necessary. And then you reap the benefit in the form of more trade and more income. That's all.
Going back to questions, I see Max Wexler. Nice to see you, Max and Natalie. Pleased to see your names on the screen. You have a question?
Yeah, hi,
Max.
everybody. Natalie's commuting home. It's just me and the dog. Hi, everybody. Hi, Dan. Great, wise assessment of the competition versus the cooperation. Ted, thanks for presenting. My question is, how's it going at 701 Amador?
It I'm not sure. I
Are you
haven't
allowed to talk
talked
about it?
to I haven't talked to James Slattery today, which I was hoping to do. We have a deadline of next Friday, not this Friday, but the 22nd. Is I don't know, some of you know, we weren't sure that that business was viable. And we asked them for a 90-day period for us to be in there and just manage it, not add any more material, not do anything different than what they're doing, just to make sure that the base that we had thought was there is there. And that 20-day period or 90-day period, they actually gave us 100 days. That 100-day period is up next Friday, the 22nd. From an economic standpoint, the numbers are there. The business is doing what we needed it to do in order to build on a platform from it and expand from there. Because we had agreed to put in close to $200,000 worth of improvements over the next couple of years, it's a 5-year lease.
Can I interrupt, Ted, and
And-
ask you to explain what
Yeah.
701 Amador is?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Amador is Building Resources in San Francisco. That their address is 701 Amador.
Mhm.
And it's down in the Bayview district of San Francisco. And it was not properly run for years. And the city put out an RFP a year ago for an operator to come in and take over. And we won that RFP. And we just started in December of this year. Is when we started that 100-day period. February, I don't remember. I think it was December. It could have been January, but anyway, it's 100 days. So that's what Amador is. You need more of an explanation, John?
Is that going to be a retail outlet?
It has been. It started almost the same time we did. I think it goes back to 93, 94, maybe even 92. And it was an adjunct to San Francisco City Recyclers.
Mm-hmm.
As they were getting closed down, that came about. And but it had been poorly managed and operated for years. And the city needed a new operator, as I said, so we won it. So the problem we're facing is that the land is really owned by the port.
Mm-hmm.
The port has leased the land to the city.
Mm-hmm.
So we are a sublessee to the city. The city has been very easy to work with the exception is they don't return phone calls as soon as the commercial sector would like them to. And but the port is being a little rigid. They're telling us how to build fences and the only kind of fences that they will accept. And that's where the stumbling block is. I'm very concerned. And we were supposed to hear back from the Department of Environment last week, and we still have not heard. They were going to have discussions with the port about that. I hope it goes through. I hope they're going to back off and let us operate successfully to the benefit of the community, the city itself, and the port district.
Is that an expansion plan of your business to solve part of the distribution problem by having remote, not remote's the wrong word, but other facilities?
Yeah, it is. Our next step would be, assuming that this is good and that this works with building resources, and I certainly hope it does. We're next looking over the next couple of years at San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And don't want to get too far because again, this transportation issue comes in and the cost of transportation and so forth. But if we can triangulate, San Francisco, Oakland, maybe something on the peninsula, but certainly down at San Jose, that would be great for customers, because we have customers that come from San Jose already. We have them coming from Santa Cruz, and of course coming from the east out of the mountains. So yeah, another facility or two would definitely help with the distribution problem.
Does your company have rolling stock?
No, we don't. We've got a couple of pickup trucks, and we got a 21 foot stake bed. Period.
Does anybody else have questions for Ted? To me, this is interesting. I could go on for a long time, but other people ask questions.
Someone, Ashley, Louisiana, asked a question in the chat, and they said, do you provide trainings throughout the Bay Area, and have you partnered with jurisdictions to provide any trainings that you can speak on a little more?
We do. We have been contracted with the county of San Jose, and we have provided 3 worker trainings over the last probably 4 years. We were interrupted by COVID, and we've had 1 since COVID, and we had 2 prior to COVID that we had done. And we intend this year to have an actual workshop, and that was a worker training. That was a 12, 14-day course where we actually took a building down. And the other thing we do is we provide workshops, 1 and 2 day workshops, primarily for homeowners, architects, contractors, engineers, anybody who's wants a 10,000 foot view of what deconstruction is. And I just gave one in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago, Tennessee, and I've got one coming up in Santa Barbara next month, the city and county of Santa Barbara. And what we've decided to do is hold them at our facility, so that we could just have people individually subscribe, whereas these others have all been supported by a city or a local organization, AIA chapter or something like that. But what we'll do is just advertise it as a come one, come all. So that's our next step.
So you mentioned the city of San Jose, but I've also noticed from the county of San Mateo, they had listed trainings.
Did I say San? I meant San Mateo.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Geez, Chris Kuhnhackl is going to strangle me for forgetting that. But yeah, she was the driver.
Okay. And you had trainings in 2023. Are you going to have more trainings with them in 2024?
That is up to her. My understanding is they have the budget dollars, but I don't know that he or she and the county have the bandwidth to do it. But we have talked about it. So we are in discussion with Krista Kuhnhackl about it.
And are you in discussion with any other jurisdictions?
No.
Okay.
So
I wish we were, but we're not.
Ted, you're describing to me a business that has a lot of lines in the lake, and it seems to require a lot of communication. So when somebody has to talk to the Port of San Francisco about the quality of fences, are you the administrative staff, or are there other people?
There are, yeah. We've got Michael, I'm trying to retire. I had tried to retire 5 years ago, and my replacement lasted only 4 months. So I was dragged back in, and but now my replacement is in place, has been for 2 years. It's Michael Chambers, and he used to be our auditor, by the way. And he's our executive director, and he's the one who actually has done 99% of the work on building resources, and that's that 701 Amador, getting it straightened out. We also have Matt Larkin, who's our really our outside sales guy, and he's calling on homeowners and businesses and contractors and bringing in the materials. We've got Brandy Souza. He's our general manager. He was also is very instrumental in running the retail operation. We have Christine Scully, who's our marketing coordinator and has been the one who got the retail ads and is working on our not retail but our radio ads. Excuse me. And she's also the one that's really working hard on getting all the items posted up on our online system. And we have Kristen Williams, who's our national project coordinator. All projects go through her, so we make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed before it's turned over to the appraisers, and then she's the one who also signs off on the appraisal. We have the newest member is Andres Messia, and he's our commercial department head, if you will, head of our commercial deconstruction.
It sounds like they must be all busy. We have a couple of more questions. Dan, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to ask what your experience with COVID was. I wanted to say to start with that we were only closed for 3 days. And then we read the guidance that we got from the state, the county, and the city, and we found that if we sold hardware, if we sold building materials, if we disposed of discarded materials, any one of those was enough to call us an essential business, and we were supposed to stay open. And I think a lot of the nonprofits in the reuse world went closed, but I wonder if you did, and if you had what your experience with COVID was.
We never closed, not a day, not an hour. We stayed open, and it was tough, but it was certainly worth it.
Yeah,
And I would certainly do it again.
we
and
had a
would
we had a big increase in income after COVID. That
well,
started,
after, right, so did
yeah.
we.
Yep,
Yep.
a lot of people getting rid of things and a lot of people buying things.
Well, it was, and a lot of people did everything else they could do.
Yeah.
So they came to us as for a weekend exercise.
Ted, it's been a great fun talking to you.
Thank you. It always a pleasure to talk with kindred spirits.
Yeah, oh, good. Ted, I agree with Dan. This has been a lot of fun. But I want to get a little bit slightly into the weeds. When you did a training, you said you had a group of people and you trained them as you took down a building. I think you said you did that for a city or a county. When you do that, do the individual people getting trained pay a fee for your time and services, or does the city contract with you to do that training for the community?
Yeah, the organization that has the cadre, be it the county, be it Youth Build, be it some other like the California Conservation Corps, they paid the fee. The individuals did not.
And if I could follow up, let's say it was a group of 10 people.
Yeah.
What would you, or smaller, however you want to efficiently train people, what would a city have to pay for that type of training, city or county?
Not including travel expenses for
Yes.
myself or whatever trainer it would be.
Yeah.
There's a couple of costs. Paying us is an $18,000 bill
Uh-huh.
for 14 days.
Wow.
Plus 2 days on each end. So I'm there a couple of days early to make sure things are copacetic.
Sure.
And I spend 2 days afterwards to discuss the outcome and what we should have done, what we shouldn't have done, etc. With the sponsor.
Is it typical? What's a typical training? 5 people, 10 people? My point in all of this is that if these people are trained and get a job, the per cost of creating that job is minuscule compared to what industry and government contracts allow for. So it sounds like you're really rather efficient in getting young people into a good trade.
Yeah, we are. And the thing about it is, we don't expect any of those, young or not. We don't expect any be a deconstruction worker for the rest of their life. But it's a hell of a good introduction to the construction trades.
Sure.
I used to be. I've retired from that, but I used to be an OSHA trainer. So everything is done to OSHA specifications and safety and that sort of thing. So when the students walk onto a job site, they know terminology, they know safety, they've got goggles, they got hard hats, they've got tool belts, they boots. They really understand what safety is, and that puts them far ahead of the day labor that you would pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, when I joined a deconstruction crew with Jim Primdahl from Oregon, I don't know if you ever ran across Jim. He was quite a good trainer. He had us doing, the whole crew doing calisthenics every morning to loosen up. It was also a socializing, bonding is the term. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, we do stretching exercises every morning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Ted, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. It's really interesting stuff. I wish you the best of luck in solving that distribution problem. On our show, we always segue from something new and cool to something old that was cool. And so we're going to segue into our Recycling Archive segment. You're welcome to stay aboard.
Can we give Ted a round of applause first?
I was. What?
Thank you, Ted. This was a great way to catch up.
Dan, Neil, when he said something old, I thought he was going to refer to the three of us.
Well, we're old, but we're still productive.
Sure enough.
We're old, but we're not in the way all the way. Anyway.
Yeah,
that is true.
There's a great Bob Dylan line in the times they are changing. If you can't get out of the way or give us a hand or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're still helping out.
We are.
Yep.
We are. John, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Ted. And so with that segue, we're going to turn it over to the Executive Director of the Recycling Archives, Susan Kinsella.
Thank you. Let's see. I gotta set up I want to do a PowerPoint with this. So I need to share screen and find it. Okay. And it's covering up where I have to go to be able to start it. Oh, I can play it from here. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, John, for giving me the floor here. I was starting to write up a presentation that was also about a reuse story for tonight, but then Dan Knapp let me know that a recycler who has been essential to the development of Australia's recycling system is critically ill, and she's not expected to live much longer. So I'm going to talk about her tonight instead. Her name is Carolyn Brooks, and we have an ancillary interview already in our collection because she interviewed her husband, Jerry Gillespie, for us back in early 2020. In the course of that interview, she added a number of comments that gave us an insight into her thinking as well. So I pulled up a lot of stuff out of that. Carolyn and Jerry met several decades ago, and I think that might have been when Jerry was working on developing the policies and the community engagement that ultimately got the Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, where the nation's capital of Canberra is located, to adopt a goal of no waste by 2010, the first such goal in the world at that time. That unprecedented, bold goal setting in the mid-1990s was what soon influenced our own zero waste goal in the US. When Dan Knapp brought the concept home from the No Waste campaign in Australia, and the name morphed into zero waste as the idea spread excitedly among recyclers all across the country here. And then the California Resource Recovery Association held the first zero waste conference in Monterey in 1997. Jerry, in Australia, has deep expertise in composting and soil regeneration. He was focused on the policy and the communications for the No Waste campaign, while Carolyn was a graphic artist who worked for their recycling program and the campaign for more than 15 years. Now, we have seen some of her graphic images in a previous ZWAC program here, but tonight I want to combine those with Carolyn's own thoughtful commentary that was part of her conversation with Jerry in his interview. So let's look at some of her drawings together. Some of the things that I love about Carolyn's art is that it always feels uplifting to me. I think it inspires hope for the future as it very clearly, yet also simply, lays out visual images of what we writers spend pages to describe. Her images are definitely in the category that Dan mentioned earlier of each being a picture worth 1,000 words, or 1,000 words being engendering this picture that can express them, as they distill pages and pages of discussion down into clear and beautiful pictures. So let me see if I can, okay, good. As I mentioned, Jerry had deep expertise in enriching soil to support growing healthy food, so Carolyn made this image to reflect that. And I love the way that she shows how many things can go into compost. I mean, apple cores and worms, leftover food, extra plant material, and then ties that back into the home. In their campaigns to encourage no waste, Jerry and Carolyn pulled in many people in rural areas, including farmers, and I think this image would immediately speak volumes to them. Similarly, I think that this image of Carolyn's also speaks especially to farmers as well, explaining why compost is so much better to use than chemical fertilizers. Now, this image seems to be directed more towards people in neighborhoods and towns. It shows so many things that they might not have thought about, like windows and furniture and bicycles and clothing, as well as bottles and cans and food, that should be reused or recycled and not thrown out when they're done with. Whoops, I went too far on that one. And this one is another take on the same theme for a different town's program. And then one to appeal to school kids. But throughout Jerry's interview, even though Carolyn is the one asking the questions, she also adds in comments about her experiences with promoting recycling. And in particular, she's often disappointed in government management of the programs. In describing her more than a decade and a half of being hired to do recycling graphics and communications for the Australian ACT government's recycling program, Carolyn says, "It was disappointing for me after putting in so much effort to come up with branding and strong messages to see that there was not the commitment at the top levels of the government to see it through and to understand that waste could be a resource. I remember when I suggested a poster with the theme, Trash is Treasure, only to be told by the government person, oh no, we don't want anyone to think that somebody's making money out of recycling. And that was quite a shock to me, she said. But she went ahead and created an image anyway that drove that treasure message home in a most delightful way. Carolyn was very focused on creating communications that made recycling easy for people to understand and to do, but the government was not always so in touch. As she says, another disappointment for me was the lost opportunity right at the beginning of the 90s to come up with a national color coding scheme for bins. A lack of consistency became very confusing for people moving from state to state, where often the schools had different colored bins from the ones in ACT, and people were confused when they didn't need to be. And Jerry chimes in with, Yeah, when we started doing the original investigation, by which I think he means when they were researching the best way to set up the program, a yellow lid on a bin was already color-coded for nuclear waste, so using it for recycling bins was just stupid. It was part of the problem we had in pivoting from treating everything as a waste system rather than as a collection of valuable refined products. Oops, I went too far again. Okay. So Jerry talks with Carolyn about a different town's recycling program for which they did trials and surveys, saying, we measured the impact of the trials we did in Kaleen with a survey document mailed to all households. People had to fill out the survey and then they had to put it into a prepaid envelope, take it to a post office and mail it to us. And yet we had a 55% response rate, which was unheard of for a mail-in survey. People were engaged in the process. Your graphic design staff, he said to Carolyn, and the latest City to Soil program demonstrated that if you give people the right tools, motivation, and information, they'll do what you want them to do, especially if they can see that there's local community benefit. So, I don't know, this is very sensitive, apparently. Okay. Here's an example of how Carolyn used a drawing to help people think through how they could bring recycling and environmental advances into their homes. And then she even comments on the recycling trucks. And I think that that's one of her graphics on the recycling truck. She says, it was also very sad that for several years, all the recycling trucks around Canberra had a no waste by 2010 logo. But then it was just quietly removed. I mean, so what did that tell people? That there really wasn't a commitment? That their government thought no waste was possible? There were also some shockingly nasty situations that developed because recycling requires a collaboration of many different entities like government, companies, the public, and more. And it can be especially vulnerable if one of them just refuses to cooperate. Jerry describes what happened in a suburb of Sydney, Australia, when he says, when competition appeared for all of the organic outputs from the large city markets there, the large French waste company that was actually running the contract at the time told the potential new operator, who was intending to implement composting, that, well, you can do whatever you like, but eventually we'll just keep lowering the price of disposal until you simply run out of money and go broke. Jerry and Carolyn also discussed a particularly nefarious undermining of a nonprofit. And Jerry starts it off by saying, we set up Zero Waste Australia as a non-governmental organization, an NGO, in 2003. It ran successfully for 9 years. But then somebody got on the board who saw commercial advantage for himself. He stole the brand by registering the name and the logo of the NGO as a subsidiary of his own private company. There was very little we could do. None of the government agencies who looked after registrations or intellectual property in Australia would help us fight this takeover. None of the governmental organizations were prepared to do anything about it. So he simply got away with it. He stole the brand, the business opportunities, and the finances. All the effort that everyone had put in to create value for the NGO, he put it in his own pocket. So it appears to me that the laws protecting nonprofits are not as stringent in Australia as in the US, but it's still shocking to hear about this. And Carolyn adds, and when I challenged him as the creator of the logos, he sued me for defamation. We were very much affected by that. Carolyn and Jerry describe another situation in which a nonprofit was not protected by the government. Jerry describes Revolve, saying, Revolve started up in 1984 as a landfill scavenging organization, similar to what Dan Knapp and Mary Lou Van Devender had been doing with Urban Ore in the US, scavenging and dropping off to supply retail stores. It grew fast and made a lot of profit. It got to 1.4 million's turnover and 34 employees. And as it grew, Resolve gained influence in government circles for a much more ambitious plan that led to the government embracing the world's first no-waste goal. The company drew up a zero-waste site plan for a new facility complete with roadways and buildings so materials could be protected from sun, wind, and rain. And then some people in the ACT government became concerned that we were talking about removing something like 70 to 80% of the material from the material stream. Of course, they're talking about zero waste, so that makes sense. Those were the people, though, who ran the Treasury. He calls them gray-haired men who use budgets to justify everything. If Revolve went ahead with its commitment to divert 80% of incoming material to reuse, recycling, and composting, they thought, then the government would lose an enormous amount of income from tip fees at the landfill. So in about 2001, they set about to totally destroy the Revolve operation. In about 2006, they succeeded by putting the business out to bid. This was the exact same process that happened to the community recycling networks in other parts of the world as well. The business belonged to the community, but it was still put out to bid. That was what went to the courts, and ultimately Revolve was put into liquidation and the business was totally lost to the community. Carolyn adds more information here, saying, so from what I can gather, the private business that eventually won the tender or the bid for Revolve's business, the Green Shed as it's called, has done very well and has given back to the community. But nevertheless, what I think a lot of people don't realize is that this is a very different type of ownership. It's a for-profit business, not a nonprofit business. And this private company is there to make a profit. That's their main objective. And therefore, they reject anything which isn't easy to sell. And that's a huge difference. Anything they don't want goes straight to landfill. Whereas when Revolve was run by the community, everything that could be salvaged, even if there was no foreseeable market for it, was stacked out back and kept for customers who might maybe need an odd bit of building material or something for an art project. It's just much more retail-based now. Through all of those experiences, Carolyn kept using her skills and creativity to produce images that help people teach their communities and bring them together. This one is a training manual for creating zero waste at big public festivals and events. And towards the end of the interview, Carolyn and Jerry get to talking about whether or not recycling has a spiritual dimension. Carolyn muses, well, I suppose the spiritual element is identifying ourselves as part of a much bigger thing. No matter what you think that much bigger thing is, indigenous societies understood that they were part of a web of life. They had great respect for every other living being and even for inanimate parts of the world that have embedded spirit. I think we've become quite removed from that connection. And then she talks about a failure that turned into a success story, beginning with maybe 15 years ago, the Victorian government, which was running out of a landfill space. So they decided to truck their industrial wastes up to a farming area where I grew up in Northwest Victoria. There would have been large trucks thundering along a highway with a 5 or 6 hour drive each way. And the very place that they decided to dig the hole was in the food bowl of Victoria. This was an arid farming district which grows a lot of wheat, but also a lot of irrigated fruit and vegetables that feed Melbourne and many other places in and around Australia. It was very delicate environmentally. And the great thing was that even though that area is very conservative politically, the whole community united behind the movement to stop it from happening. Jerry agrees, saying, yes, they totally revolted against it. So that effort backfired into a great way to bring the community together to support the environment. And Carolyn says, if it's not the government suffocating an idea, it's others not moving ahead with it because they're only interested in researching it rather than doing anything. I've noticed they keep researching something that doesn't need any more researching, or they say they're doing something, but then they don't do it. Jerry says things are very hard to push through when the entire waste industry is against it. And Carolyn adds, particularly in our local area, it's sometimes laziness on the part of people who have been in the same job for a very long time and don't want to do anything too different, don't want to step off the edge or get blamed for something that doesn't work. I hope that people think more seriously about what they throw away. These disasters that we've gone through recently have shown that it's a community working together that pulls everybody through. One thing that they both celebrated was when Jerry said, "Seeing the zero waste movement take off and keep moving at such a phenomenal rate around the world where it's been run by fairly young people is very heartening to see." And here's another one of my favorites. Whoops, let's go back. This one always makes me laugh. It reminds me that despite all the real difficulties and frustrations, I think both Carolyn and Jerry would agree that working in the recycling, zero waste, and composting fields is also a true delight. And I'm just really sad to hear how ill she is, and we're going to miss her a lot. I think she did brilliant work. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. That was also a true delight. It reminds me a little of the title of the book Dan was talking about, 1,000 words make a picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it also illustrates how important it is that we get these stories told before people pass. And it was nice that we had Jerry on a couple of years ago, and I think Carolyn was on too. But years from now, when zero waste is the worldwide norm, and the young people of today have made it so, I think it's important that this history be told right. And projects like the Recycling Archives are collecting the stories that need to be told. So I really appreciate, Susan and Dan, you doing this. And I'm glad we have this as a monthly feature.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm glad that we get to tell the stories. We do have a website that's going to, I think, get unveiled at least at a beginning stage by early summer or so. But I think these stories are really important because, for one, now we see all these programs functioning like collection programs and other kinds of programs, but don't understand how difficult it was and the kinds of just creative leaps that people had to make in order to bring them into existence. And I think that some of the solutions that they came up with are also going to be helpful to us in the future too.
And it's also important to remember that if you too make an impact in zero waste, that you will one day have nice things said about you eloquently by Susan Kinsella.
Yep.
And with that, I'm going to adjourn the show. We do this the second Tuesday of every month, start at 5:30 p.m. Glad you spent your zero waste week cocktail time with us. We will have something new and interesting next month and hope you join us.